Is working with a co-host a smart move, or is it more trouble than it's worth? Hi, I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and in this video, I'll be sharing with you the answer to this and 3 huge mistakes that podcasters make when they get into co-hosting their shows. It never quite works the way I want it to. Well, listen, someone who downloaded our free podcast guest release asked me to cover whether it's best to be a single host as opposing to have a co-host from a legal and financial perspective. And I'm actually not going to answer that question so much as just to give my point of view. I think it's not better or worse. It's just that having co-hosts or anybody else on your team does have some issues that can come up. But it also has benefits because you can have a conversation rather than needing to do a monologue presentation. So that means less scripting, less, you're not carrying the whole weight yourself. So what I'll say is if you're going to have a co-host, there are some big mistakes that you can make if you're not thinking it through. So first off, start by thinking the relationship through. The default rule when two or more people work together on something is that it's a partnership. That means they're co-owners, equal co-owners. If that's what you really want, great, but get it down. Do something. Who owns what in the scenario needs to be, something that you've thought through. Friends don't always stay that way once the real work starts or when money starts to come in. In fact, a couple of years ago, I had a client who came to me because he and some friends had started up a show. And at some point, they had a little disagreement about how they were going to raise the money. They were they going to use a Patreon model? Were they going to use an advertising supported model, a donation, various things. And ultimately, he got sort of frustrated with the scenario and his main co-host, even though this guy was the head of the network and the founder of the show, the co-host, who had been with him now for a while, was sort of in the lead role at this point. So my guy said, hey, you know what? In a text message said, hey, you know what? It's your show. We'll do it your way. No problem. Well, next thing you know, co-host is saying, yeah, it's my show. I'm taking it and going to this other network. Give me everything and goodbye. And that led to a big dispute. And all of this could have been addressed had they had the conversations and thought things through from the very beginning. Now, the second big mistake that podcasters make when they start working with co-hosts and others is assuming that everything will be 50-50 or that it should be 50-50 because you get into all kinds of questions about ownership and revenue and who's responsible for what. Is everybody contributing equally? Is everybody buying, shipping in to buy the equipment? Are they paying for the bills for the hosting and the services and those kinds of things? Are they all doing their part to market and promote the show? Is everybody pulling their own weight? Or is somebody just kicking back and showing up to record and thinking that they're in for half? Is everybody going to stay on board for the long haul? Another important question. And the third big mistake that podcasters make when they start getting into co-hosting relationships is related to those two other things, is just not getting things in writing. You've got to know that everybody is on the same page. Who gets what if the project gets picked up or becomes profitable, or what if it becomes a loser and doesn't become profitable? What happens if somebody leaves? What happens if someone needs to be fired or relieved of their responsibilities? What happens to someone who puts in money and resources or someone who doesn't put in money and resources? All of those things need to be put in writing. And the answer to what we're talking about here is what I call a podcast prenup. Now, there are many, many different forms of podcast prenups, but a host agreement could be one. It could be where you're just doing a partnership or a joint venture. It could be a co-production agreement. It could be where you're hiring a host or something, or could be as simple as, hey, we're going to do this together. You're going to be recording, but I do everything else. It's my show. That's the nature of my own show with my co-host, and we got that clear and handled early on in the relationship. So if you need a podcast prenup, one place you can get one is from my site at podcastlawforms.com. And I don't have a graphic ready to put up on the screen, and this isn't meant to be a big pitch like that anyway, but if you need podcast law forms, podcastlawforms.com is the place. So I hope that is helpful to you. Now, let me just say, today's episode, as all episodes of my Legit Podcast Pro show, are brought to you by the Legit Podcast Pro group. And it's a free membership. Just come on over to legitpodcastpro.com and join up and become a member for free. And we exchange lots of information and ideas and questions and all of that kind of stuff on a much more regular basis inside the Facebook group and by email sometimes. So I hope you'll consider joining up over at legitpodcastpro.com. And that's about it for today. So if you have had a situation arise, like I've described, with a co-host, with a guest, the guest release is another kind of podcast prenup. I should have said that. If you've had a problem with a co-host, a co-producer, some co-ownership issues, or if it's gone great for you, post about it here. Put a note in the comments, like and share, and please tell your friends about what I'm doing here. Try to do this every Thursday afternoon, sometime around 3 o'clock, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. I'm going to sign off now. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. Look for me at gordonfiremark.com, and don't forget, join up the or thepodcastlawyer.com, and don't forget to join up at legitpodcastpro.com. All right, see you again next week. Have a great week.